My name is Sal, and I go and me and my wife, we volunteer at our church. We're Roman Catholic, and if you want to get married in the Catholic Church, you have to take a class called pre-Cana, which is just a fancy way of saying here's a crash course on a lot of the things that you probably haven't talked about. I mean, you probably have, but you'd be surprised. There's a lot of people who aren't talking about basic things. This cover all the basics. So this is whether it's finances, sexuality, children, our living situation. There's a whole bunch more. I have a book right here. It's called A Decision to Love.
I like that.
You can buy it. It's a workbook. The actual, this is the teacher's copy, just like you see in a school. I have all the workbooks, worksheets rather, and they have a green. The students have a green copy, and it's weird to say students because you think the teacher student dynamic. It's the guy in the button down at school, and then the 14-year-olds. But I go in and there's a 40-year-old marrying a 37-year-old, and they're like, hey man, we already have a house, we live together, what are you teaching us? You're 32 years old. So we have to do it if you want to get married in the church. And I wasn't super religious. My wife, she's the zealot of the relationship, which I love to joke around about. And so I'm more science minded. I've always have been, but this took me by surprise. We took pre-Cana because we got married in Catholic church. And I was like, all right, let me do this Friday and Saturday class, or I gotta spend my weekend during fishing season to get married, go through the motions. But we ended up loving it, and it was it has all these discussion points about.
Lost you there for a second.
Yeah, sorry, I think that my internet kicked out for a second.
Oh, good.
Okay, so sorry if I just going back. So thought it was a waste of time. It's something I had to do, but we ended up loving it. And trust me when I say it was well worth the time. We also do feedback sheets at the end of the class, and almost every couple, when we tell them honest opinion, no names on it, would you do it? Is it a waste of your time? If you didn't have to do it, would you have done it now, knowing what it was? And it's 99% positive. I think one out of every couple, 100 people is meh, waste of my time. But people really get a lot of takeaways out of this. So the big ones that we cover is we kind of there's three couples that teach it. There's three couples who teach it, and there's the young couple, which is me and my wife. We just went through this a few years ago. Then there's a middle-aged couple. The kids are teenagers, and then there's an older couple. And the older couple is our kids are out of the house. We live the life. But we're a little not out of touch, but we can't connect as much. So there's the spectrum between less experience to less experience, but more more relatable to most experienced, least relatable, and that spectrum opens up a lot of different perspectives. So having said that, because we're younger, they're like, hey, we're gonna give you guys some of the harder ones to touch on, sexuality. So you're going into a church, picture this, you got 10 couples around and sitting around, and they're looking at you, and I'm sitting right next to a cross in a church, and we're about to have the sex talk. So it's about as uncomfortable as it gets. And they're the older couple is yeah, you guys can handle it, good luck, So, but there's a lot of misconceptions. So especially with this book, I don't want to get too preachy or too religious, but first off, I want to stick to the science of it, but I get this all the time. They say that a lot of people think that the church is against sex before marriage, and it's not true. Actually, even our deacon and our priest came in, and it's not even remotely true. It's actually. And right after we taught this class, we taught it, no joke, a week ago, our deacon came in and said to the class, God is love and sex is love. It's not, and I quote, just screwing around. It's this interpersonal connection that he wants you to have. It's a gift from God. Again, I'm not the most religious person, but this really touched me because it was you're taught that it's this like, in this puritanical culture, like, don't do that, or you can't, shouldn't do this before marriage. But it's really, it's not true. It's actually promoted, and loving and healthy dynamic. And that's what really took me back, because if you're, you know, in general, we have this thing that it's like sex is frowned upon, but it's when you realize that it's not, it's that it's actually encouraged with a healthy and what's the word I'm looking for? Sustainable.
Yeah, consistent, sustainable.
Environment. It's actually the best thing that you could have. And
oh yeah, absolutely.
That really struck a chord with me. Actually, me and my wife, and we're like, oh, so and my wife being like the zealot, like I said, growing up, she's like she didn't learn what sex was until like health class. She's like, no, that's not where babies come from. Like, trust me, I know. As opposed to me myself. I mean, I don't know about you, but like ever since we were young, we had phones and computers, and I'm sure you discovered.
Oh yeah, I found porn early. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So there's this. We live in a world where there's a lot of unhealthy dynamics around sex, and listen, I spent my late teens into my 20s screwing around. I think we all did, and it's pretty meaningless. And until you find the one that you really like, with, whether that's a girlfriend or a fiance or wife, it really is something else, and you can tell anybody who's in a relationship, ask anybody who's in a relationship, they can tell you that, be like, this is, having sex with the one you love is much, much more different, better than, picking up a girl from the bar. Yeah, you get a rush from the bar, but it's not a sustainable model. Although, however, with the church, maybe a little bit, while that may be not so, that one's a little bit more shocking. This, what may not be shocking is they do have a little bit more of the traditional gender roles, which, is a little taboo to talk about nowadays. We're teaching a class, and you could see people who are on X or Y side of the spectrum, and they're sitting there and like, is he allowed to say that? Or he's like, how dare he say that? But as it is promoted that, men are biologically different from women. And one of the main things that we talk about, and there's a whole section about this where we play videos, etc. I won't get too far into it. It's communication. Men and women communicate different. As a biological fact. Brains are wired different. No matter what anybody wants to say, and this isn't to harp on gender ideology or I'm not going to even go there. But biologically, men and women are different, especially in their communication. Men are more objective and women are more subjective. It's men are how something is, and women are how they feel about how something is. That's objectively.
And just like that, we were canceled and demonetized. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Hey, this is not how it goes, Yeah. But that's the more, I don't want to say regressive, but that is, something that's a little bit more traditional viewpoint. Maybe is the word I'm looking for. So, I mean, do you see that nowadays? Is that hard to like talk about with you?
It depends on who you're talking to. I've been doing a lot of my own digging and research, and I think I see a ton of overlaps between things like abstract and spirituality and religion and data and science. And there's a good quote. It's like, traditions are just experiments that worked.
Right. Yeah.
So when they're saying things like, oh, men should do this, women should do that, it's like, oh, it's because it's patriarchy and misogyny. It's like, no, it's because we tried it and it wasn't really as effective as it could have been. And even in the case of the men and women talking differently, there's 2 books I really recommend. It's literally called The Male Brain and the Female Brain. They're both written by a woman named Luann Brizendine. I think she's like a neuropsychiatrist or a neuroendocrinologist. And a psychiatrist on all these fancy terms. And basically what she does in the books, it's fantastic. She basically starts from like in utero to like baby years all the way until like, Pubescent, puberty years, 20s, 30s, getting married, falling in love, having a kid, and like what's happening in the brain every step of the way, and where a lot of the misconceptions happen between the two genders about what is, like, I'm going to get canceled for just saying the word two genders, what is going on that a lot of men and women don't understand. Like, why is communication so important for women? Why is getting stuff done so important for men? There's literally neurological differences going on that people try to really push up against. But at some point, you can kind of like put somebody to an fMRI machine and say, like, it's right there. Like how much farther are we going to argue this? And at some point, if you keep going down that route, it tends to get into this realm of like, well, who gets to decide what reality is? Like, we're not going that far. We're not. That's a little bit too far for me. But in any case, I think you see a lot of people, which I only learned about pre-K now like maybe 2 years ago. One of my patients from massage, and I was talking about the importance of like something like premarital counseling, and people like, yeah, pre-K now. I was like, that's a thing? Like, oh yeah, the church has been doing it for God knows how long, because they discovered marital issues way back then. They actually figured out how to solve the problem back then too. And so much of it comes down to like one major problem. I think it's so interesting you mentioned like multiple, younger, middle, older couples doing this whole process, and how nowadays, I've heard this quoted differently. It was a pretty good idea. It's like we've lost a lot of vertical generational wisdom, and now it's becoming very horizontal.
I like it.
So people are basically looking to each other in the same age range of like, how do you do this? How do you do that? Rather than going like, so there's somebody older than me who's been down this road before who can explain to me what's going on. And there's a number of different angles and problems as to why it's becoming such an issue with people basically saying like, oh, it's the old generation's fault that this is happening. We just like, and it's a lot of it is just youthful impulsiveness and emotions. And this comes out even like the science again. It's like when I was 21, my testosterone was just so ridiculously high. I couldn't see anything but just like boobs and butts everywhere. Like it's all I ever saw. And now 35, I'm like, oh, actually, she has a face. She has a personality. Whoa, look at this stuff. I didn't know this was even here. But it's like, it wasn't me trying to be an a-hole. It was my hormones literally dictating my reality. And I think it's a big thing we don't see it. But I have a friend of mine who's a women's health coach. And I just talked to her the other day, and I was asking her, like, how many times do you get women who come to you who'll be like their 30s or 40s, who have no idea that their menstrual cycle will affect like their hormones and their mood? And they're like, more than should be, way more than you should. Like, you should have known this when you were like a teenager.
Right. Yeah.
And somewhere along the lines, we're just losing it. And I think what we see repeatedly in one way or another is this like bump against biology, where it's like we try new things and then it ends up kind of just like grinding back to the way it was before.
You can't argue with biology. This is a quote that me and my wife say all the time. So, we have a daughter. She's 7 months old today.
Mm-hmm. Congrats.
Thank you. We had trouble conceiving. Now my wife is a little bit older, so we both got checked. We were like, it was at first like, hey, this is awesome. We're trying. Then it wasn't working. It's like, all right, let's go to the doctor. And he was like, you're good to me, like your numbers, the boys, they're swimming, no big deal. And then, unfortunately, funny enough, but go to, my wife goes to the doctor and I'm like, yeah, you have some complications. And my wife goes, oh, well, what can we do about this? And there's nothing you can do about it. You can take supplements, you can eat healthy, you can, there's some ways you can maximize it if you want to go the natural route, or there's some procedures as IUI or IVF, which we tried IUI 2 times. We were about to go to IVF the next time. Thankfully, we actually got pregnant naturally before that happened. So just, by trying. But the number one thing that they told us was like, you can't argue with biology. Like, here's your hormone numbers. Here's your egg count. There's no amount of, now granted, again, we did have a child naturally, but it's like a law of numbers. So when we went to the fertility specialist, they were like, hey, this menstrual cycle, you're releasing, this many eggs. Most people release double that, So, and then of those, these were recoverable, and then these are viable. And then if we put a sperm in each one of these, you have a 5% chance that one of these 3 will take. And they were like, so like you just went from 10 to 5 to 3, and of those 3, there's a 5% chance. And like, that's 1 round of IVF. And IVF is, thankfully, we have NISHIP insurance, which is very good. If you don't have it, it's like $30,000 a pop. The medication course is like $10,000 a pop. Like just the medication alone. My fridge was filled with it. We were ready to do it. It was like $10,000. So we didn't pay that. Granted, we had friends that were going to pay it, and we're like, wow, we have it. So we ended up donating it. But not to get too far away from the masculinity talk, but you cannot argue with biology. There's no negotiating, and we learned it the very, very hard way, the hardest way, in fact.
Yeah. This is a bit of a side stretch, but it kind of ties into the masculinity thing too. There's a really good book. Recommend. It's called. Doesn't sound great, but it's better than it sounds. Maybe not, depending on who's reading it. Okay, it's called Feminism Against Progress. Yeah, it sounds a little intense. And it's actually written by a woman who is like actually a staunch feminist, but she's like one of the more like just let women get the option to do what they want to do, not all men suck and they're the problems in the world. Like she's like one of the earlier iterations of like we just want to just contribute and have options. But she talks a lot about this problem what we're seeing now, and the way two things she talks about. One is big romance. So they're like big pharma, big tech is big romance. This idea of like you have to find the one, and it has to be you'll just know, and if it's ever any doubt whatsoever, it's not going to work out, and you've got all the time in the world. And the other one was meat Lego Gnosticism, which is a heavy one, like MEAT, and the idea being that when you say you can't argue with biology, there's people out there who are basically saying like, well, why not? Who says we can't? Like, we can screw with our hormones, we could do this, we could do that, we could do procedures and whatnot. Like, why couldn't we completely control our fertility cycle? And at some point, the question is like, well, how far before we stop being human?
Right.
But yeah, that's a pop into mind. That's a big one. But the idea then, she was talking about how she herself was very much like trying to go a very, very, very non-traditional path in life. And eventually she decided she wanted to have kids. Was convinced that the feeling of like wanting to be a mother and caring for your baby and whatnot was all just culturally imposed and artificial until she had a child of her own, and she went like, holy mother of crap, this feeling is 10 times more powerful than I ever thought it would ever be. This wasn't some cultural bullshit. This is actually biology at play.
Right.
And this ties back into our can't argue biology thing. And even for men, I think it's the same thing when it comes back to the masculinity thing, that there's so many activities and things going on in today's day and age, not just the food, but also the behaviors and whatnot, that it's this crazy interlinking problem that we kind of don't want to. It's like the quiet part out loud about how, as a man, like your environment, your testosterone levels, how much you're exercising, how much you're eating clean, are you surrounded by other men who actually push you and challenge you in a healthy way? Do you have a bigger purpose in yourself in life? And how many guys are succumbing to like porn, weed, video games, numbing out the suicide rate?
I want to step right into that because that's actually part of our pre-Cama talk. So one of our subjects is actually called our past, and like the sub chapter is called addictions. So when I took pre-Cana, we had an addiction specialist come in. So they're from an organization on Long Island that helps people with any kind of addiction, so drug addictions, alcoholism. But there's a lot that are, how do we say this? So there's three big ones that are chemically driven, and then besides dopamine, and we're going to get to that. And then there's a whole bunch that actually aren't, and the ones that aren't actually chemically driven tend to be more prevalent than the ones that are chemically driven in our society. Exogenous chemicals, I should say. So now, what is addiction? Addiction is, so dopamine is the reward hormone in our head. And what you're talking about is men have this reward system that we need to get things done. We need to see an input and get an instant, maybe not instant, but a reward. So the greater the input, the greater the dopamine release, because you did all this work, you built the shed by yourself, and then you get that dopamine hit. You're standing outside. You're like, oh my God, I built this 4 walls, the timbers, the asphalt shingles. And your wife's like, cool, we can store stuff in it. What's the big deal? Like, I don't, cool. You can put the lawnmower in there now, I guess, It's our reward system. Now, addiction is what happens when our dopamine reward system is overridden by an external stimulus that can be positive, but is in the context of problems is a negative. And so the big ones that are chemicals are alcoholism. Let me just back up one more time. Addiction is something that does affect men more than women, and that is biologically known. So when it comes to the masculinity, there's I'm very pro masculine. The church is about more of those traditional masculine roles. But here's the negative side of it: is that you have to, as a man, it's up to your responsibility to curb these negatives. And I think that's just as important, if not more important. So if you want to be pro masculine, you have to be able to be do the right thing, be a manly figure, etc. We can go down this line. I'm sure you have a million podcasts where they're talking about what it is to be a man. But what's the flip side? What are you preventing? You're preventing weak characteristics. Not implying that women are weak, but one of those is this vice of addiction. So the big ones are that are exogenous, chemically driven is alcohol. How many guys you come home from work, they're on the LIRR or whatever the equivalent is down south, and they gotta have the beer on the way home, or the beer, the tall boy with dinner, and then they're watching the game afterwards, and they're having a few. Next thing you know, you're 4 or 5 deep on a Wednesday night or whatever. Second, nicotine with vaping, cigarettes, Zyn packs. Come on, like we know it, and it may not be, in the short term, the most detrimental thing, but it's a financial strain, and it can lead to adverse health effects like cancer. Obviously, everybody knows smoking causes cancer. And then obviously hard drug use. So I don't need to sit here and tell you that heroin's bad for you. So, obviously those are 3 very general categories, and they're all chemicals. So you can even lump all 3 of those in drugs as like a pharmacologist would. But then there's the ones if you talk to anybody in your health class, be like, yeah, I'm not going to drink, I'm not going to smoke, and I'm not going to do drugs right there. But it's the ones that we don't really talk about that don't have this exogenous chemical stimuli that really can even do even more damage. So these are what you were touching on before. Gambling. Online gambling is right now the worst problem that addiction centers are seeing right now. People are throwing their lives away over this. And with the legalization of, like here in New York, of online gambling on your phone, DraftKings, Sportsbook, you name it, is terrible. And it starts small. It's like, hey, I'm gonna give someone a card with some scratch offs on it. Seems harmless, and then they get that little rush. Most people really, whatever, I could do a scratch off. I won $5, no big deal. But up to a person who has a gambling addiction, that's like giving them that little hit that they need to like fall down the rabbit hole. Pornography, it's a dopamine hit. That's what it is. It's and if you know anything about what's called the dopamine wave pool, is that every time you kind of exceed that threshold of dopaminergic release, it's a little harder than the previous time to hit that same action potential threshold. So each time, so this is like, again, going back to the drug addict, you're doing heroin on the street. The first time you did it, they call it chasing the dragon. The first time you did it, you're maybe 10 cc's, you're flying on the moon, and you feel amazing. The second time you do it, you didn't get there. The third time you do it, all right, let me just up it a little bit, 15 cc's. Then the third time, fourth time, fifth time. Next thing you know, you're a junkie on the street, and you're ODing, and you're Narcaned up. So even though it's not exogenous chemical stimuli, pornography is the same way. So maybe you saw, like you were saying, you were a 15-year-old boy, you saw boobs on the internet. Whoa, you're like, and you watch porn and you keep doing it, and then you're like, wow, what's the next thing? And the dopamine wave pool is hijacking your reward system. That's the next thing. And it's the next thing. And it's like, next thing you know, you're into like, interracial midget strap-on porn. You're like, okay, like, how did I get here? How did I get here? And not disparaging anyone who likes that stuff. But,
for any interracial midget stuff on porn stars, we apologize if you're listening to this.
But it's funny when you have that talk in a church and you're like, hey, and I say the same thing, and I make a joke, I make it lighthearted, and Jesus weeps behind me, but it's true. And we have this, this conversation in our church, but it starts off innocuous and you go down this rabbit hole until it's unsustainable, and you're doing things that are either violent or illegal, and that's the natural progression. So yes, pornography is a dopamine hijacking pathway too. Not something you thought you'd hear from a pre-Cana counselor, wedding counselor.
But probably nowadays more than ever.
Sure, yeah. And what else? So pornography, online gambling, and then just social media. That's a big one. I mean, it's literally designed to give you a dopamine hit. You get home, you flop on the couch, and you're doom scrolling, and you're just just the next one, the next one, the next one, and then you haven't talked to your partner in an hour. You go down the rabbit hole. So these are all examples of there are more for sure. Some are more larger vices than others, but addiction is a disease, and I do feel that way because it's an abnormal status of your dopamine reward system pathway. And like I said, that's a little bit of a far cry from when I start talking about that in a church setting, people are looking at me like, how did we get here?
Even with the interesting thing with the church, though, is I remember hearing this good quote. It was like, the opposite of addiction is community.
Yes, they said that exactly. Yes, that was included in our conversation. That is.
Yeah, and especially nowadays, I'm seeing more and more. I have any guys that I talk to. It's like if they're hung up on. It's either there's a couple things, but two things popped into mind. One is if they're hung up on an addiction of some sort, it could be porn, gambling, whatever it may be. It's a question of, what are you trying to get the dopamine hit to cover up? Are you bored? Are you just uncomfortable? Is there something you have to work on that you don't want to work on?
Yeah.
Like, I know personally, me and video games is kind of a big thing. And even to this day, where it's like, if I get the urge to play a game, I know I'm either bored or there's a project I'm working on that I don't know the next step. It's very unambiguous. I'm not confident. Even with the coaching is very up in the air and kind of superfluous how to do it. There are guides you can follow, but just figuring out how to get a client, how to get a following, all this fun stuff, how to build out a program that actually works for people. It's all kind of just like built from scratch, more or less. And when I get those hits of like, I feel like playing Call of Duty or League of Legends or some random shit, I'm immediately like, okay, what's the problem? What's the real problem? Because your brain doesn't tell you outright, oh, you're about to go, like, you're interested in watching porn right now because you have to have an uncomfortable conversation with your wife and you don't want to. It just says, go, like, strap on midget porn, go for it. Just whatever it was. And and this is the crazy thing, it's like your conscious mind, I think is something like they estimate, it's like your conscious mind can take in about like 10 or 15, we'll say like megabytes of information per second, but the actual sensory data you're getting from your body is like in the millions. So you can't focus on everything all at once. And even then, when you have things like behavior loops that are going on in the back of your head, your subconscious, it's not going to tell you flat out why. It's going to tell you, like, you feel like smoking a cigarette.
Yeah.
Why? Because I'm anxious. Why? Figure it out. Well, really, what's happening? Well, I had a client in massage therapy. It was so fun. She had high blood pressure, and she was in a toxic marriage. She was getting divorced. And she goes to her doctor while her husband's on vacation, and her blood pressure was, like, perfect. And he's like, wow, your blood pressure's great. What are you doing? She's like, my husband's not home. There's the problem. And it's like, I guarantee, like, the second I hear like the garage door opening at the front, like, my blood pressure will just spike. If I didn't draw that connection of what the problem was, if whatever the anxiety is or the boredom, whatever it may be, it can be difficult for people to draw the connection of, like, why am I going to porn? Because I'm lonely. Why are you lonely? Because I don't know how to socialize. Yeah. Why do you know how to socialize? Nobody taught me how to. Why not? Because my childhood sucked. Like, oh, okay, porn, childhood. There's a problem way back here. But immediately the only thing you can see is, I just want to jerk off to strap on midget porn. whatever it may be.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And it can be tough for people to draw those connections and really realize, in the community aspect is a big part of it, that like if you don't have somebody to sit down and just talk to or feel comfortable with emotionally is a big one. There's a whole science behind that as to why you need community and people around you, that you will just end up following these vices and these behaviors, and it'll become so big that you can't open your mind enough to see the pathways where it's coming from. It's very difficult to draw the connections as to where certain behaviors are coming from. It's very easy to just come to the behavior itself.
Yeah, and actually that goes right into like a positive feedback loop. So, when I say positive feedback loop, it doesn't mean that there's a positive outcome, but for those who don't know, positive feedback loop is that the results actually catalyze or reignite the original equation. So if you're, like they say, money makes money. If you invest money in the stock market, it's going to compound. That money, your dividends are now working for you. It's those monies are going back into the stock market and taking off. Well, unfortunately, a positive feedback loop could have negative outcomes, and that's with that dopamine pathway as well. So when you're doing these things, it's, well, okay, I'm not working on, I'm not building that shed in my backyard, or I'm not studying for that certification for my next job, next promotion or next job. So I feel bad. So I need that dopamine hit. And to get that dopamine hit, I'm going to do one of these negative behaviors. I'm going to turn on the video games. I'm going to watch some porn. I'm going to go gambling. And then because you got that hit, it's that false sense of accomplishment. And then you feel that way. And then it distracts you from completing that project even more. And now you become more depressed. So then you become more dependent on those vices, which is driving you deeper down this hole in a spiral. So that's a positive feedback loop, not a positive outcome, but a negative outcome from the positive feedback loop. So, and sometimes or most of the times, people don't recognize that's what happened. I'm not depressed because I'm drinking. Yeah, you are. Yes, you are. Like, alcohol is a depressant, and every time you drink, you're happy for a little bit, and then you have a good night and you're drunk, and then you wake up and you're depressed, and so and the cycle continues, and then you need somebody to sit you down and say, "Hey, buddy, stop drinking, stop watching porn, stop in the video games, and do the thing that you're supposed to be doing, like working towards that next promotion, because you'll feel ultimately better."
Yeah, and the problems there is delayed gratification for a lot of people. Yeah. But the other big issue that I see is almost especially nowadays, what you're seeing with like this generation of people coming through, it's like a collective generational learned helplessness.
Yes, 100%. I couldn't agree with you more. Go ahead, please elaborate on that.
Yeah, where basically people are just like they've tried in the avenues that they're familiar with, and it doesn't pay off, and their brain just gives up. Your mind just says, fuck it. All instances of you ever attempting this always led to failure, so why are future instances going to be any better? So why bother? And I think in that regard, especially at a young age, like I think I found porn when I was like 12, 13 years old, something like that. Like I think the average age now is like 9 years old. It's getting worse. And flip side correlate of that is that girls as early as 13 years old doing OnlyFans.
Oh my God.
So watch your daughter. Yeah, but it's a good thing she's growing up in a Roman Catholic household. That's not going to fly at all.
Cave, 3 bedrooms, nowhere to hide.
But that from a very early age, you're being trained on the idea like, oh, you can get your sexual urges met from this random stranger on the internet who you never met before, and there's a near infinite variety of what you can get from that. And then when you go to real life, it's like, wow, I actually have to learn how to talk to somebody. I have to go take a shower. I have to learn how to flirt. I have to learn how to be. Maybe I grew up in a very toxic household where I had to find these coping mechanisms like porn and drinking to get myself just comfortable enough to survive. And then when I find stability out in the real world, I have some kind of degree of difficulty in trying to engage with a woman or a man, whatever it may be. You get that pushback, and your brain immediately goes like, well, option A is do all these things. It's a hell of a lot of work for not a guaranteed payoff, and I'm really comfortable doing it. Option B is just strap on midget porn. We're just going to keep doing that over and over again.
No, that's okay. It's really...
but this is, we're creating... we're creating an entire generation of learned helplessness because the pathways this is like that about the masculinity thing. It's like young boys need to be taught what it means to be a man, how to be a man in certain ways. And so a lot of that comes down to certain life milestones that was kind of almost built into the culture naturally that we've either circumvented entirely or altered in different ways. You still see it being expressed in certain ways. Like a big one, not that competition is really inherent with masculinity, but it's one that makes me laugh a bit. Is you ever heard, what is it, speed running in video games?
Yes.
To me, that's just an expression of like competition that could have been aimed in a better way.
Sure. Right.
And it just went, but it's like these young guys, it's like 90% men, I'm sure. That like most of them are like, I just want to do something difficult compared to other people to see what I can do.
Yeah, they got world rankings. I've seen them. They got the video.
Yes,
you're like, I'm 4 seconds behind the best guy in the world. You're like, okay, what if you applied that towards, something like
curing cancer or something like even better?
I'm not saying that you can't enjoy yourself and have, your leisure, but it's to the point where the leisure hijacks your reward system. And you brought something up before, I'd really love to touch on. You said delayed gratification.
Yeah.
So I'm huge on that. So have you ever heard? Do you know what the marshmallow test is? Stanford marshmallow.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, if you can explain.
Yeah. So those who don't know, so the Stanford marshmallow test, and me and my wife say this all the time, right? So the Stanford marshmallow test is they took a cohort of children. They said you can either have one marshmallow or pretzel, whichever you prefer, now, or if you can wait 30 minutes, you'll get 2 pretzels or marshmallows. And they did studies on the of those children and their success down the line. They've done these follow-up experiments on the same cohort, and they showed that all of the children like had that picked the delayed gratification of 2 marshmallows or 2 pretzels were actually scored better on tests, and not just immediately at that time, but down the line 20 years later, or whatever, 15, 20 years later, they scored better on their SATs. They did, they were in more successful positions in their life. So it's this like ongoing thing. Now there's a lot of critics of the marshmallow test that they say it's a very flawed experiment, but I don't think you need a PhD at Stanford to tell you that if you work hard now, you'll see the results in the future. So it's like, and to dumb it down, it's like this, like suffer now or suffer later, which, but if you suffer now, you get to pick your suffering, So, you could go to the gym and work hard and be extremely healthy. And then you're fighting, and you're fighting the negative effects in the future. You're going to have higher bone density, higher mobility, higher flexibility, lower all-cause mortality, etc., because you did the work early on.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be applied for anything. You could start a business now and work towards it and become very successful, and then you can retire at 50 as opposed to 65 and trying to live off Social Security. You can apply that to everything, almost everything too. I mean, one of the things is like a lot of people, when we have a kid too, it's like you want kids? You want to get married? You want kids? Like, are you sure? That's a lot of work. It's like having a kid because not having a kid because it's too much work is like saying I don't want to go to the gym because it's too hard. Like, yeah, you're there because it's a challenge. Same thing with a child. Like, yes, raising a child is not easy. Just throw that out there. But saying that you don't want a child, there's this huge anti-natalist push in our country right now, where it's like, you turn on any social media and you'll see it. Not pointing at any genders, but it's definitely pointing towards or propagandized at women more, where it's like, you don't want to be tied down to a man and child. Like, what are you, nuts? Like, you won't be free. You're going to lose your identity. You'd rather go on vacation every year, twice a year, 3 times a year, and it's like, it's the same thing. It's like, do you want to kind of suffer now or suffer later? It's not suffering with a kid, it's a challenge. But when you're 70 and you're lonely and you don't have any legacy, what happens? You're in a nursing home alone, dying of a broken heart, and it's like, it's the same thing. It's whether it's the gym, having a child, having a business, or a successful career. It's all the same. It's the challenge that releases that dopamine, that rewards you, and then you are are encouraged to continue down that pathway. And that goes to the famous quote. It's like, I ask not for a lighter burden, but for broader shoulders. So you'll only keep getting stronger, and you don't want your life to get easier.
Well, it's interesting. There's a number of things that bounce around my head, and at some point I'm going to sit down and just write it all out on like a board. There's so many interconnections and so many layers between so many different problems, and I think when we talk about the masculinity thing, so I'll try to start small and expand outwards, and we'll see how we can do with this. There's a really interesting thing I learned about with regards to adrenaline and stress hormones, is that it actually narrows your vision. So when you like tunnel vision, it's literally a thing because it actually narrows the aperture of what you can focus on at one time, because your body's like, there's a lion, screw everything else, there's a lion, pay attention. That when you get people who have extremely stressful circumstances growing up, that it kind of gets almost like enmeshed and wired in your nervous system and your subconscious in a way that you can only see so far into the future because you're constantly worrying about surviving today. And I think therein lies this kind of unspoken value of having a healthy masculine, man or someone in the household. Is like, your job is to try to, amongst other things, to create an aura and an environment of safety for your wife and for your children, so that they can have the ability to really expand and see lots of things. And the more you practice that, the more it kind of gets wired into you to kind of say like, oh, I can take chances. I can try new things. I can see further and further into the future because right in front of my steps right in front of me are safe, because I know they're safe because somebody's here taking care of me. But when we have these people who just spend their entire lives like trying to like paycheck to paycheck, or just like terrified of their own household, that you end up really narrowing down everything, and it ends up creating this multi-generational effect where you get young women who are coming through nowadays who just have this vitriolic feeling towards men, when there's partly justified, and like in the, I would say like the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and how like there was a strong disconnect a lot of men had towards what their role was as a father and husband in the household when we moved out of like communities and farms into like corporations and things like that.
Sure.
But that there is a real value in having some degree of safety and comfort and ability to be curious and explore that can literally affect you neurochemically and neurologically for the long haul. So I wonder then, with the people who are in the Stanford experiment with the marshmallow test, how many of those kids like who didn't do well, maybe they did well at first, they didn't do well, also came from very stressful households. I wonder how much they accounted for that.
One of the things I notice, and I go to this pre-Cana class, we teach it. Mm-hmm. So we get a list, and there's like, and this goes right into what you're saying. I thoroughly believe having a healthy relationship is part of succeeding as a human being. It's not just your career.
It not is, your, yeah, 100%. Yeah.
We look at this sheet of people, and they're not just from our community. We have people from other communities of different races. It's not like it's not a race or community type of thing. And it says they got to write down what they do for a living, where they live, do they live together. Let me tell you, almost all of them are very successful people who come through this class. It's not like they're all police. I'm not talking they're millionaires, but police officers, business owners, nurses, doctors, computer scientists, programmers, and most of them, and some of them are like, how did you succeed so much? They're like, yeah, we're 27, we're getting married. I bought our house 4 years ago. I'm like, you were 23 when you bought a house on Long Island? Like, how's so it just goes to show you that it's like, if you needed any more reinforcement that this is like, I don't want to say the right way to live, and it's not about our religion. I'm not here to convert anyone, but the fact that you're people who typically subscribe to a religion to have these what's the word, like pillars or moral guidelines, are also the same people who are more successful and who are more what's the word, fulfilled.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And there's a good book. It's called The Happiness Hypothesis by Jonathan Haidt. Talks a lot about that, how he does a lot of he's a sociologist. He does a lot of correlations of the research and studies talking about the idea of, happiness comes from within, but also outside of yourself too. And a big part of that component is having something bigger than yourself that you're part of. Like that is something to tell people, like, we are hyper communal creatures. We're not just social. We're like, you literally need other humans to function at peak capacity. Sure. Big part of the reason I moved down to Georgia is I had a lot of my good childhood friends who actually like the ones who were like really making moves in life, and I was making great money in New York, but I just felt like I just didn't have the same social network anymore. And the future didn't really seem too great with the cost of housing, like you said a second ago. And within that, then creates this bigger problem of I'm personally pretty much convinced, like a big part, aside from the dating scene being a hot mess, that the dating apps are not helping, but a big component is like a real loss of things like religion, things like, community and spirituality in a bigger sense of thing. And I remember hearing this good perspective. There was like a lot of young women in particular, men. I had a priest on here. I think he was Roman Catholic, Greek Orthodox, I'm pretty sure. And he was a pastor or priest or something. And he was talking about how like him and like every other congregation he knows of having a massive influx of young men, dramatically large influx of young men. And there is just something to this idea of like, what else is there?
Yep.
What more to me? And there's a biological component to that. We haven't really fully mapped it out, but neurologically, we are creatures that need to have things we're working on. It's like a mix of I'm competing with you and I'm collaborating with you. Like it has to be a little bit of both. And right now we're going into like hyper individualism, and the rates of depression and anxiety are through the roof right now across the board.
Sure.
And especially, I think the largest cohort of this is turning into like a broader podcast, but I don't give a shit at this point. Depressed. It's like largest cohort of people on antidepressants is single women over 40 who have no children. And it's like, well, you can just there is a point where you start arguing with like statistics and reality and say, well, that's because actually, or it's just neurological, it's biological at some point. And I think especially for that part of that reasoning might be some kind of weird feedback loop coming back to where it did. Like we kind of spent the last 50, 60, 70 years shitting on masculinity in some ways, and now look what's happening on a broader scale.
I have this hypothesis, and this may sound a little sexist, and I've said the same thing to my wife, and she didn't bite my head off, so I think it's okay. I'll share it, but I have this hypothesis that, like, in the same way, going back to the reward systems, like that men, we need to conquer, so we need to build that shed to that. We need to build the family, we need to build the career, and then it's the standing on that mountain that we get the reward and satisfaction out of. But I do believe that women, and just this is anecdotally, kind of in the same way hardwired towards maybe like, being happier when they're rearing a family. And I'm going to try to.
I see this hesitation.
Yeah, no, I don't want to.
Like an FBI raid's going to bust through the house any minute.
Like, I don't want you barefoot and pregnant, but like you have a kid and you're like so happy.
Oh yeah. That book I mentioned earlier, The Female Brain, actually talks about how many women have come to her practice who like were like badass, hardcore corporate career gunning women, and then like when they get pregnant and they're just like, I don't fucking care anymore. I'm just all I give a shit about is baby, nothing else.
Yeah,
and people are like, that's culture, that's community, that's the people, that's the social norms telling you that. And it's like, no, there's literally. We've done the fMRI. There's literally neurological changes going on in your brain. This is another. And then the other side is like men's brains don't change as much through time. Women's brains like change dramatically through time, and it's a function of the times and points in their lives, from puberty and whatnot. But yeah, like pregnant mommy brain is a thing. 100%. Literally.
And let me tell you that I didn't believe it, but when I had my child, I know for a fact my brain chemistry changed.
Oh yeah, dad brain too.
And not to hijack anything against one, but like we see, I was so empathetic. My number one thing is like my wife. We had our child. We got out of the hospital. My number one thing, my brain was like I don't know. It was like adrenaline mode for like weeks, literally weeks. And I remember coming back like from the hospital, and I was like aggressive with people who weren't my wife. Like my mom came to visit. I'm like, what do you want? Like it's my mom. Like, and my wife is there, and just like my wife and my child were like the most important things. And I was so protective. And I remember that like my child was actually born a little small. She wasn't a preemie, but she was preemie sized. And so I remember we didn't have any preemie diapers. So I had to go to CVS and they didn't have any. And I'm literally like at home, like crying. And this is like, I'm not crying. I'm like bawling tears in my living room. Like, we don't have any diapers for the baby. And I'm like, and then like a week later, I'm like, was I okay? Like, this is like, oh my God, it was so emotional. And it was like my brain chemistry was, and then, and then it's like a month later, it was like, that was weird. I was acting weird for the last month. And then like 3 months, I was like, wow, the last 3 months, I was acting really funny. I still feel like I'm not back to my old self. And that's a man.
You may never be. Yeah.
Have a kid. I can only imagine my wife, like we have arguments and like, I'll be like, oh yeah, I have to remember that like if my brains are scrambled and I didn't go through the hormonal changes, I didn't birth a child, like I feel so empathetic. I got to reel myself back in. I'm like, oh God, like I feel awful, So it's having a child really does physically change you, and both man and female. Not to hijack anything against women, but true story. I still,
yeah, Is who Scott Galloway is?
Sounds familiar, but I can't.
He's a professor. I think he's like a multi-millionaire. He's like a professor at NYU, like a business professor. He has a book. It's like The Algebra of Wealth. But he talks about this concept of like 1 + 1 = 3 when it comes to marriage. And I can tell you myself, like I've noticed myself through time. A big part of the reason I wanted to move down to this area was because I have friends nearby I've known since I was like basically like 10, 12 years old. They're doing things. They're building their families. They're like buying houses. Like they're doing things. It's like once I got here, I was just like the motivation to want to like do more just came rushing in. And then I hopped on dating apps again. I've gotten a couple leads. I got a couple dates coming up. And like once I started getting conversations going with like one or two women, that I was like, oh wow, this is actually like maybe it could go somewhere. Like my energy levels just skyrocketed in terms of like I need to go like clean my apartment and do this and go shop and get new clothes and what's my business looking like, making it. Everything just started like exploding out of me. I was just like, where the fuck was this 3 months ago?
There's a word for that actually. This, if you want it succinctly, it's called. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
What's the word? The
word is actually the definition is synergy. It's the sum of the parts is greater than the sum of the parts by themselves. So that's the actual technical definition of. Well, and I'm sure maybe you have like some sort of analogy or another way to say it. But you're 100% right with my wife and all that. Like, she makes X money, I make Y money. Pooled together, yeah, we do pretty well for ourselves. But she's like, she's grinding hard and thinking about our child. She actually got promoted many times. And then same with me. She's like, she pushed me. She's like, hey, maybe you should go for a master's, which I did. And I literally tripled my income. It's not an exaggeration, tripled my income because she suggested it. And it's like,
I gotta get my master's.
A lot of people, it depends. A lot of people, maybe not, my salary is not very high now, but maybe it was just really low before. But
yeah.
But the point is that, and it's almost like also, and going to be biblical, iron sharpens iron as man sharpens another man. But that also, it's your community, like your wife or whoever's around you, you're going to be stronger. You're going to want to work harder and more because you're around another person who wants to do the same thing, If you're hanging out with a bum, you married a pot smoker, not anything, but a person who stays on the couch all day watching Netflix, yeah, you're probably going to also be on that couch watching Netflix. It's, it's not very likely that they're going to be on the couch watching Netflix all day and you're out grinding and, and starting several side businesses, it's not possible.
Well, yeah, it's like you are the average of the 5 people closest to you.
Yeah, that's the other, I say that all the time too,
Yeah, and recognizing just that there is a component to you that just, I think I remember I had this idea where it's like accountability is not a bug, it's a feature.
Yep.
And a lot of people look at it as like, there must be something wrong with me because I need people to motivate me. Like, it's called being human. It's literally what we were designed to do. We're not designed as lone wolves who don't operate in isolation. Your ability to control your impulses usually is a function of your environment, and your environment includes people around you. So when you choose to have certain people in your life and certain people around you, you are basically activating within yourself your ability to control certain impulse. Like if you had a healthy marriage, what's the likelihood you're going to want to watch porn? Maybe it crosses your mind once in a while, but it's just like, nah, I'm good. I got it covered in other ways. Yeah. I'm happy there. Yeah. Or if you're like you're urging to get a hit of from gambling or addiction or some kind of dopamine hit, it's like, well, there's something else I could do. Oh, I got buddies next door. We can go grab set aside and talk. That's going to have a similar effect on my body as me spending 3 hours on DraftKings or Call of Duty or something. Right. But it's healthier for me.
Sure. Yeah.
And so voluntarily, like what you said earlier, like don't argue with the biology. It's like, where are you lacking in your life, especially as a man? what do you need to be improving on? Where's the bottleneck? It's like, well, like I don't have especially nowadays, we have many guys with the dating scene. I don't know if we could talk too much to like the female side of things, but the women's side of things, but the male side of things, it's like so many guys just have that they did not get the healthy amount of rejection they needed in their early years to learn what it means to like approach a woman and just try. And like it's like that fear of failure, the fear of trying. When maybe growing up you would have got that, but nowadays video games and things like that, it's success guaranteed.
Yeah.
So you never learn to tolerate failure and rejection. So like the leap is too big, and this is that learned helplessness again. Whereas like I've only ever had successes doing this, I've only had failures doing that. Why am I going to keep bothering doing that? There's no point. There's no chance. Even I remember this times like in the past when I like had previous girlfriends, I approached them and I was just like, I don't know why they gave me her number. I don't understand what the hell that makes no
confidence,
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, but like I did not, because your brain's like, well, this is what's probably going to happen. What? Everything that's happened before. It's the only thing you can reference. The only thing you reference is what's happened before, plus what other people tell you. So if you don't have good experience in the past, and people you don't trust, the future looks like shit.
Yep. I mean, me and my wife, we met in the gym. The very first time we talked, She actually rejected me. And I wasn't hitting on her, I was just genuinely striking up a conversation with her. But, I mean, good looking girl in the gym, fit, like, yeah, I'll talk to her, So but the very first time, I talked to her and she was like, yeah, like I got it. Like I know how to do the exercise, creep, Not really. She didn't call me a creep, but she was dismissive. But then, I was, I was persistent and, I was dating a lot at the time and, I was used to my rejection and I was used to my successes. And so when me and her were talking, I'm just like a social guy. I like to talk. I had a lot of friends in the gym. So, her friends were now my friends and then we were like part of each other's social circles. And then she's like, okay, now I'll talk to you because I see that you're not just some weird guy like that's trying to hit on me in the gym. Like you're a friendly guy with a lot of, connections and like a big community here. Yep. And I was like, oh, okay. So like, I'll take it as a compliment, but, I'm still pursuing her and, I didn't even know at the time, like she was like, I was interested in her and she really wasn't interested in me. And I was like, hey, you want to hang out? And she was like, yeah, I'll hang out with you. But I was like, hey, like, I'm like, cool, we're going to start dating soon. And she was like, this guy is a nice guy. He wants to buy me lunch, like, whatever. And we went on a nature walk. And then she brings up like some guy that she's like, I'm not seeing this guy anymore. Like he kind of ghosted me. I was like, me? I like that's weird that you would bring that up with me. And she's like, I didn't know that you were interested in me. And I was like, all right, so like you didn't talk to me first. I didn't know like there was no spark. Like like, oh God, like 0 for 2. No, I could have just like deaded it right there. I could have been like, all right, fuck this. Yeah. I did the opposite. I doubled down. I had like 2 tastes of rejection from my wife. And it wasn't creepy. I was like, hey. I just looked her right in the eye. It was like after like the second or third time we hung out. It's like, kiss I wasn't clear. Very explicit. It was like, I want to take you out on a date. And she's like, oh my God, where? Like, and I was like, I didn't think I'd get this far. I should have had that one lined up. And then so I remember her just like my brain was like, help, So I was like, like she likes Babylon. I was like, let me, I'll take you to this place in Babylon. And she's like, oh my God, I'd love to go there. So, but I was like, hey, listen, but it's not like we're friends. Like I'm romantically interested in you. I think a lot of women in today's generation would be like, okay, that's weird that you would approach it this way, but not my wife. And she was like, she gave me a chance. She was like, all right, like, let's see where this goes. And then it did like a 180 when she was like, time to get into a relationship. We went on a date and, like a week or 2 later, we went out with our friends and she looked at me and she's like, you're my boyfriend now. And I was like, okay. Sure, I'll take it. And then like things progressed and it was like down the line, she was like, I think it's time I moved in. I'm like, I wear the pants in this relationship and I was going to ask you this weekend. I had to, but I agree. So it was like, if I wasn't kind of, I don't want to say used to, but if I wasn't expecting the rejection or I wasn't persistent, I wasn't creep. I wasn't like fucking following her to her house. I was just, I was doing the proper, chivalrous courting is the word,
Mm-hmm.
and it worked out. Now we're married. We did pre-Cana, we got married. Honeymoon, kid, the whole shebang. But for just tying it back to like what you were saying with fear of rejection, is that like you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah, and I think a lot of I'm suspecting, and I definitely catch myself. I do a lot of like trying to get like research and whatnot in videos. Gone down like the YouTube rabbit holes of like red pill and things like that.
Sure. And what guy
And
in 2025 hasn't at least?
Oh god, yeah. But I think what's happening among other things is like there is a bit of like a gender war going on.
100%. Yeah, that's what.
And I think part of it for both sides is like there's like this collective, I wouldn't say collective grief, collective emotional impact. So it's like if you get rejected by two girls and four other guys that all got rejected by two girls and you talk about it, it feels like it got rejected by 10 girls.
Yeah.
And in reality, it's like in your case, maybe it was just like, no, it's just me by myself doing my own thing. I can handle 1 to 2. But if it went past a certain threshold, I would say, fuck it, and shut down. And anybody would. Like, you get enough rejection in life, eventually your brain just says, I'm not going to, this is learned helplessness in a nutshell. But it's like a collective effect that we're seeing with a lot of young guys and women too, who are just like, their certain expectations are out of line with reality in certain cases. And a lot of the men have the problem of trying to figure out, like, are you actually getting a healthy amount of rejection or getting an unhealthy amount right now? Or are you actually learning from your mistakes? Are you doing things differently? Are you really worth it? Like, are you really as good as you could be? Are you really emotionally grounded? Are you able to, like, in your case, I bet you part of the attraction that her she had with you was like, oh wow, here she came back. And most men are like, I want her to tell me on the first time. It's like, it could be a soft test, among other things, as to your ability to tolerate failure and mistakes and things like that. That's a big one when it comes to masculinity, is like emotional self-regulation and grounding. And I think part of those things, a lot of that we see nowadays, like that multi-generational effect, is like we do have in pre-Cana, but not enough men out there who are helping to teach younger guys, like, this is what it's going to be like. She's going to put you through like a soft gauntlet of nonsense before she goes on the first date with you, or she might reject you for like. And once you start to learn like female like hormones and whatnot, you realize like don't try to like that's like a happy wife, happy life. I'm not sure what your opinion on that, but it's like you're better off doing everything you can to build a life that you want that also includes somebody who can be happy within it, rather than saying I will do everything for you.
No, I believe that you should be both simultaneously self-satisfied, but also you should be making daily sacrifices for your partner. And we teach that. Those daily sacrifices and the daily services that you have, you should always be trying to kind of compete with the other one, and I'm not going to go too far down that rabbit hole, because it's like, what happens if you're out competing your partner and they don't want to compete, and how much they're servicing you, so it becomes this one-sided, like, I'm doing everything for, my spouse and they're not doing it for me. But it's not that way, in a healthy relationship. But, I don't think it's happy wife, happy life. It's happy spouse, happy house, but
there you go. That's a good one.
Personally, I think as a man, and this might be a little sexist, but like, I have a higher threshold for discomfort. And I think a lot of men do, I can, how many guys work a trade and can be in the fucking field every day in 100-degree weather, pouring asphalt, and, so that they can have a salary, which they, in their mind, is their love language for their wife, so that they can, she could buy the extended luxury SUV for their 5 kids, but it's how we present our love. But I do think that men just generally have that higher like discomfort tolerance. But
I think there's something in there, and I think what a lot of guys don't really grasp is that a lot of that discomfort tolerance is like shifted in a different direction, especially when you have kids. That a lot of times, like a woman, there's so many different things so many lines you could pull on here, but like tolerance for discomfort really is more a function of like them prepping for it. And even if you don't have kids, it's still how your brain is wired. That like you're going to be on alert for that kid. I have a buddy of mine. I remember he asked me about some for advice. I'm not even married. I was giving him marriage advice, but he was looking for some advice. I'm like, well, she wants me to like plan more dates and pick out breakfast in the morning. And it was a bit like I just feel like I'm so burned out. Like, why does that even matter to her? Why does it even matter to her? I don't give a fuck. Who cares? We'll go wherever. We'll eat whatever the fuck. I don't care. And I made a point to say like, well, because he has a 1-year-old child. And I made a point to say like, you have to understand like her brain, whether she realizes it or not, is like on overdrive for that child. And like, there's no more hard drive space left for just like basic shit. Like, let's figure out where to go on a date.
Yeah.
Let's figure out what we should have for breakfast. So you taking that off her plate is you picking up some of that burden for her in a way.
Yeah.
So like the tolerance for discomfort is like most men can be, what's the word, nurturing, not to the same extent that women might be able to naturally for certain, like at certain phases of the child's life. Generally speaking, especially when they're very, very, very young, like a 7-month-old, like that baby is just like, your nervous system is their nervous system. The calmer she is, the calmer the baby is. And the calmer you are, the calmer she is. It's like a whole chain of events that kind of goes through the whole thing.
It's an umbrella. We teach it as an umbrella in pre-K. The man is like provides the stability, the household, the like the food, the old evolutionary, I brought the deer back to the camp, while she's like laying there nursing the child, and the wife provides the nurture of the child, the basic education. And let me tell you, we're no different than cavemen. Like, me and my wife too. She's doing these little things. I mean, I love spending time with my daughter. I love it. I love it. But there's just things like watch her. My wife's like, "Hey, watch her do this," and I'm like, I didn't even think to try that with her. Tummy time. But what happens if we try to get her to roll over at this angle? And I'm like, cool. I was just like making her fly around like an airplane, But she's like, I see that her brain is naturally wired to progress, and I'm just having fun with her, So which is still productive for the child, but still I could see my wife is just wired completely different, so in a positive way, better than me in that regards, so
different way.
Yeah, I mean in the nurture of the child,
Yeah, generally speaking, I think what ideally, and here's that feedback loop that tracking system is supposed to happen is as far as I understand it, and more kind of dug into it, at a very, very, very young age, mother-child is just one unit. Mm-hmm. Nervous system is just, the child has no sense of individuality.
Yeah, for sure.
It just exists as whatever mom's feeling, the kid's feeling, more or less. And vice versa. The kid's upset, mom gets upset, she gets pissed at you, all fun things happen. But then at a certain point, individuation starts to happen. It's usually where a fatherly figure or a masculine figure will step in and kind of say all right, you need to start learning how to take some soft punches now. You need to be able to take care of yourself, how to deal with adversity, how to deal with being uncomfortable. Color regulation is kind of built into the model day one with baby and mother and infant with the father. Down the road, self-regulation is usually where dad steps in more.
Absolutely.
To essentially start having them learn, you have to learn how to calm yourself down now. Because we're not always going to be there to give you a hug. Things like that.
Yeah. No, this is great information. I do have to start getting going soon, but I did want to leave it off with one thing. There is just biological difference again. I saw this study recently. I cannot remember the author of it. I didn't think it'd come up, but they did these audio tests for parents that were sleeping, and mothers. Mothers would wake up to the sounds of their babies crying, which is my daughter could be crying while sleeping. I'm sleeping, and I'm a light sleeper too. I can sleep through it pretty easy too. But fathers would actually wake up to the sounds of leaves rustling outside much easier, and that's true. My wife can sleep through anything, and I hear a bump in the night, and I'm sprung out of bed. I'm like, what is that? And she's like, what'd you hear? What'd you hear, babe? And I'm like, and it's just what we're literally hardwired into, doing, but evolutionarily. So.
I remember seeing a comment. I saw the video. It was a comment in the video that was my baby starts crying within 0.5 seconds. I could hear it, but my husband sleeps through it. But he can hear a squirrel fart halfway down the block. And he'll be out of bed, ready to go.
Exactly. So.
But awesome. This has been great.
Yeah,
thank you so much for your time.
Me too. I appreciate it.
Any social media things? Anything you wanted to plug in there?
Oh, no, I don't have any, I don't have
all good.
I am, plug for my business. If you're on Long Island, I am also a licensed home inspector on the side besides my day job, so please reach out to me. SalCal Property Consultants LLC. I also do estimating on the side, so if you have any sort of construction projects coming up, and I'm friends with a lot of subcontractors, so that's my little business plug. So thank you.
Awesome.
All right,
thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, take care.